The last place I expected my father to drop a bombshell was over his birthday dinner. The dining room of our family's main estate was lit with soft amber hues, the clinking of silverware punctuating the low hum of conversation. Brandon sat beside him, sipping Pinot Noir, too smug by half, and then it came. "This lodge would be perfect for Brandon," my father said, folding his napkin and flashing that particular smile of his, the one he used when he'd already made a decision without consulting anyone else. "In fact, it's already done. The title's in his name now. Silence, not the polite kind, but the hollow, teeth-gritting kind that follows a betrayal no one saw coming, or rather, one everyone saw coming but hoped wouldn't materialize." I placed my fork down slowly. "That's interesting, Dad," I said, voice even. "You might want to double-check the paperwork." Brandon tilted his head, that condescending arch of his eyebrow twitching. "Excuse me? My name is Ethan Carter, and Woodland Lodge wasn't yours to give away. It had once belonged to my grandmother, my mother's mother, and when she passed 5 years ago, it became mine. Not through sentiment or inheritance hearsay, but via a trust she personally arranged with her longtime attorney, Miss Ramirez. I hadn't spoken about it. I never needed to until now." "You're mistaken," Brandon said quickly. "The property was passed to your father. He has full authority over." "No," I interrupted, pulling out my phone. "The property was held in a conditional trust. One that activates if any unauthorized party attempts to claim, transfer, or modify ownership. That trust is irrevocable. And as of this morning, it's active." My father's face changed. He leaned in, squinting at the document on my screen as if it might disappear if he just stared hard enough. But it didn't, and neither did the truth. "I have power attorney," he finally croaked, "which does not override the trust terms. The original will filed with Miss Ramirez. Not your home office version is the only one that counts." Brandon's expression cracked. His composure, manicured and polished like his designer cufflinks, faltered. "You can't be serious." "I'm very serious," I replied. "And more importantly, Grandma was serious. She knew this might happen. That's why she made sure the lodge couldn't be taken. Not by manipulation, not by coercion, certainly not by legal sleight of hand." The room went cold. My father didn't speak again for the remainder of the meal. Brandon quietly fumed beside him, his fork untouched. I didn't gloat, nor did I celebrate. There was no victory here, not yet. Only a shift. A line had been drawn. And this was just the beginning. They never really understood what Woodland Lodge meant. To them, it was acreage and asset, timber-framed luxury and waterfront property. To me, it was breath. It was the one place untouched by my father's ambitions or Brandon's aesthetic delusions. As a boy, I spent summers there with Grandma Eleanor. She was equal parts matriarch, and Mystic knew how to mend a fence, bake perfect scones, and explain root systems like they were poetry. Her garden was more than flora. It was a timeline. Everything she grew she'd planted with intent. Lavender to soothe, rosemary for clarity, wisteria for grief. We'd sit on the stone terrace at dusk, lake light flickering through pine boughs. "They'll try to take what matters most," she said once, hands dirt-streaked but sure. "So you must protect it before they even know they want it." At the time, I thought she meant her favorite rosebush. Now, I know better. 6 months ago, I got a call from Miss Ramirez. There had been inquiries. "Title searches," she said. "Your father's name keeps showing up." Her tone told me more than her words. And that's when we initiated the dormant clause, the trust's transformation from quiet formality to full legal force. Meanwhile, Brandon made appearances at family events, always steering the conversation to potential, modernization, short-term rentals, and the like. He'd never say it aloud, but I heard it anyway. "We can monetize this." My father didn't resist. He rarely did where Brandon was concerned. Grief does strange things to men who were never taught how to carry it. After Mom died, He clung to the first hand that offered distraction. Brandon provided that, and soon, he became the new compass. But he wasn't blood. He hadn't stood in the soil beside Grandma Eleanor or learned how to edge the paths with care. He hadn't sealed the windows before winter or mended the dock after the spring storms. He hadn't earned any part of the lodge, and yet he wanted all of it. They thought I would be silent, that I would fold as I had during other family tensions. But this place, this was different. This was sacred. When I visited Woodland Lodge after that dinner, I barely recognized it. Piles of construction material sat beside the porch. The herb garden had been dug up. A sleek dumpster overflowed with original light fixtures and old wooden trims. A betrayal wrapped in plastic sheeting and blueprints. I took photos of everything, every scrap, every scar. That evening, I called Miss Ramirez. "We're moving forward," I said. "Understood," she replied. "And Ethan?" "Yes, your grandmother was right to trust you. It happened on a Saturday. I'd driven up to Woodland Lodge to assess the damage. The air was unusually still, the kind of quiet that felt like a warning. I hadn't even stepped out of my car when the black Escalade roared into the gravel driveway behind me. Brandon emerged before the engine had even stopped fully, dressed in a designer jacket too sharp for the wilderness and boots that had never touched real dirt. He was flanked by two men well-tailored, middle-aged, and radiating corporate aggression. Investors, I assumed. Not one of them looked at the lodge. They looked at me. "You're trespassing," Brandon announced, his voice theatrical. I didn't move. "That's rich, considering you're standing on trust-protected property." One of the men stepped forward and offered a business card. "Mr. Carter, perhaps we could speak privately? We represent a group interested in revitalizing this space, transforming it into something with broader appeal." "Like what?" I asked. "A boutique resort? A wedding venue? A tech retreat with infinity hot tubs and imported bamboo walls?" The other investor chuckled, as if I were joking. I wasn't. "Gentlemen," I said, turning to them with deliberate calm, "this land was placed in an irrevocable trust. That trust prohibits any sale, lease, or structural modification without unanimous consent from all named beneficiaries." "And you're the only beneficiary," Brandon snapped. "Exactly." The taller of the two men narrowed his eyes. "We were told this was already in process. That title had been transferred." I nodded. "It was attempted. Fraudulently. And that's now documented." Brandon's face turned a shade darker. "Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? Do you think your grandmother would have wanted this place to rot just to serve your nostalgia?" "My grandmother," I said, slowly, "wanted this land protected. She created a legal structure that activates only when someone tries to exploit it. She knew you, Brandon. Even if she never met you, she knew you." One of the investors sighed, already sensing where this was headed. "Come on," he muttered to his partner. "It's over." "No," Brandon barked. "You stay. I've put too much into this. The deposits, the marketing. You said this would work." "No," I corrected. "You said it would. You promised them something that was never yours to give. That's not confidence, it's fraud." For a moment, I thought he'd lunge. Instead, he stormed off toward the car, pulling out his phone and muttering into it. The investors didn't follow. One of them turned to me. "If you ever change your mind, here's my card." "I won't," I replied. "But I'll keep it in case your lawyers need to be looped in later." They left shortly after, tires spitting gravel behind them. Brandon didn't look back. I stood there for a while, absorbing the silence. Then I went inside. The damage was worse than I'd thought. Crown moldings removed. Old doorknobs replaced with cheap brushed metal. The fireplace mantel, original hand-carved cedar, was gone. I didn't even need to guess where it had ended up. I took more photos. Every angle, every scar. Back home, I emailed Miss Ramirez a full report, including documentation of the investor visit. Her reply was swift. "Thank you. This strengthens our position significantly." I'll prepare cease and desist letters for all contractors and third-party representatives who've been contacted. The next morning, Brandon showed up at the main house. No fanfare, no investors, just him. "You're going too far," he said the moment I opened the door. "No," I replied. "I'm simply meeting force with structure. My grandmother didn't leave me a house. She left me a responsibility. She left you leverage. She left me legacy." He laughed, bitter and breathy. "You think this is about family? This is about opportunity. About doing something useful with land that sits empty 9 months a year. I use the lodge. I maintain it. I share it with family and friends, people who value it for what it is, not what it can be turned into." Brandon took a step forward, lowering his voice. "You're really going to do this to your father? To us? We've already started the process. Contractors, interior designers. We had a plan. That's your mistake," I said. "You had a scheme, and now it's collapsed. You lied to investors, ignored legal warnings, and tried to exploit your spouse's access to something that was never his to give." His nostrils flared. "Don't flatter yourself, Ethan. You're not some hero of heritage. You're just bitter, stuck, afraid to let anything evolve." "No," I said, stepping back inside and beginning to close the door. "I just know the difference between evolution and erasure." I closed it quietly. He didn't knock again. 2 days later, my father asked to meet. We sat in the library, surrounded by books my mother once arranged by season and scent. He looked older, tired, but not angry. "I didn't know," he said. "Not the extent. I thought it was just going to be a few updates." Brandon handled the contractors. "And the promotional material? The resort branding? The architectural renderings labeled Brandon Retreat and Spa?" He winced. "I didn't see all of it, but you saw enough." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry. I wanted to believe him. I really did. And maybe I did partially. He was always good at compartmentalizing, but this had shaken him. I filed for divorce," he added. "That I hadn't expected." He must have seen my reaction and continued. "Not just because of the lodge, because I realized I stopped recognizing myself when I looked at him. And that's not love. That's desperation." We sat in silence after that. Outside, the late afternoon sun streamed through the library windows, catching dust motes and painting them gold. It reminded me of childhood, of simpler years, when my father and I used to read together in that very room. "I want to help restore the lodge," he said finally. I looked at him for a long time. "You're welcome to," I replied, "but only as someone who understands what it stands for." He nodded once, and that was enough for now. There was something poetic about pulling weeds with the same man who once signed them into the soil. My father wasn't a gardener, not in the literal sense anyway. He always joked that he could close a 6-figure deal, but couldn't keep a fern alive. Yet there he was, kneeling in the soft dirt beside me on a misty Saturday morning, clearing what remained of Grandma Eleanor's herb garden. "She always planted the lavender on the north side," he murmured, half to himself. I glanced over. "You remember that?" "She said it calmed the wind," he said, smiling faintly. I never knew what that meant. "Neither did I replied. But it worked. The rhythm of work was healing in its own way. Quiet, focused, not dramatic or cinematic, just real. He spent weekends with me now, at the lodge, helping remove the tacky modern finishes Brandon had installed. Board by board, we replaced synthetic fixtures with reclaimed wood, restained the floors with cedar oil, and patched up what we could from the structural damage the early contractors had caused. We didn't talk much about Brandon, not at first. The silence between us was cautious, not cold but layered, like we were both navigating new versions of each other. But eventually, the words came. "I let him drive," my father admitted one morning as we painted the deck railings. "Told myself it was easier, less messy. I didn't want another loss. You didn't lose Mom by being passive," I said. But you almost lost her memory by becoming that way. He nodded. I know. That same week, I received an email from Miss Ramirez. Subject, marketing materials. Urgent Ethan. Your father discovered this in Brandon's office. We need to talk. The attached PDFs stopped me cold. Brandon Retreat and Spa. Renderings of Woodland Lodge twisted beyond recognition. The dock replaced with a marina. Grandma's garden paved into a parking lot. Drone imagery layered with QR codes linking to investor decks, all promising an elevated wilderness experience and untapped lakeside potential. But what made my stomach turn were the timestamps. They'd been created months before the transfer was even attempted. Brandon had planned everything, had expected to win. The next morning I confronted my father. How much of this did you really know? I saw some of the drafts, he admitted. He told me they were just concepts, that nothing would move forward without my input. And you believed him? I wanted to. I didn't respond. He placed a folder on the table. There's more. Inside, emails, payment confirmations, and investor correspondence. Brandon had been making promises. Financial ones. He'd accepted deposits, booked pre-construction consultations, even secured contractors, all on the assumption that he'd be in control within weeks. Were you financially tied into this? I asked carefully. He shook his head. He used his own shell company for most of it, but some investors came through friends of mine. My name's on a few of those meetings. I didn't realize how far he'd taken it. I leaned back, letting the weight of it sink in. He knew what he was doing, and he knew it wouldn't work unless you stayed silent. We both sat there, the lodge breathing softly around us, creaking beams in morning light and memories stitched into every wall. That afternoon, Brandon returned. He didn't bother with pretense this time. No dramatic entrances, no entourage of investors, just him, sunglasses on, flanked by two suited men with portfolios. They're here to make you an offer, he said flatly. I didn't even stand from the porch. The property is not for sale. The taller man stepped forward. Mr. Carter, we represent a group willing to pay a significant sum. This land is held in an irrevocable trust. I interrupted. The answer is no. Brandon scoffed. Don't be stupid. Do you have any idea what you're sitting on? Yes, I said. 100 years of memory. And the reason my grandmother smiled when she talked about the future. His jaw tightened. You're throwing away opportunity. For what? Sentiment? No, my father said, stepping out from the lodge behind me. For principle. Brandon spun. Thomas, please, be reasonable. I've been reasonable. I was so reasonable I nearly lost everything that mattered. Brandon looked stunned. He turned to the investors. He doesn't mean that. I do, my father said, walking forward until they stood eye to eye. You manipulated me. You lied. You tried to turn my mother's legacy into your next side hustle. Side? And now, he added, you're trespassing. Brandon's face twisted, but he didn't argue. He turned back toward the SUV, barked a few short words to the suits, and climbed in. Gravel kicked up in his wake, the sound of harsh punctuation to the end of a long delusion. Do you think he'll come back? I asked. He might try, my father said, but not here. Not anymore. I watched the dust settle behind the trees. Later that night, we sat by the fireplace. Not the new one Brandon had installed, that was gone. We'd rebuilt the original hearth using stones from the garden and wood from a shed we'd salvaged. My father poured us each a glass of Grandma Eleanor's favorite red. I know I can't undo what happened, he said, but I want to make this right. You already started. He raised his glass. To legacy. I met his eyes. To rebuilding. It ended, not with noise but with silence. A week after Brandon's investors pulled out, Miss Ramirez forwarded me a letter. Official letterhead. Legal jargon. Thinly veiled desperation. Brandon was attempting to contest the trust. His argument? That Grandma Eleanor had not been of sound mind when she established it. I didn't laugh, but I did feel the smallest flicker of amusement. My grandmother had been sharper at 80 than most people are at 40. She'd outplayed generations of estate planners, balanced 3 businesses, and still remembered which year I caught my first trout at the lake. The irony of Brandon questioning her mental state was almost poetic. I called Miss Ramirez. "Should I be concerned?" "Not in the slightest," she replied. "This is his last card, and it's blank. Then let's end it." She filed the final paperwork the next morning. By Thursday, Brandon's legal team had withdrawn the claim entirely. Whether it was lack of evidence, mounting costs, or simple ego collapse, I didn't care. It was done. That same afternoon, my father handed me a weathered envelope. "Found it in one of your grandmother's boxes. Thought you should see it." Inside was a letter, written in her familiar, looping cursive, dated 2 months before she passed. "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means the lodge is in danger, and you're exactly where I knew you'd be, protecting it. I never doubted you, not once. This home was built from love, not concrete, and only love can keep it standing. If they come for it, don't fight with fists. Fight with your mind, your heart, and your legacy. And remember, the strongest walls are the ones no one sees because they live inside you. Love." Grandma Eleanor the First stared at the ink until the words blurred. I hadn't cried in years. That weekend, we held a small gathering at Woodland Lodge. Not a party, just something simple. Coffee, fresh scones, old music playing through restored speakers. People came, neighbors who remembered Grandma's garden tours, cousins who hadn't visited since childhood. Some brought stories, some brought tools. My father grilled by the lake, same way he used to when I was 10. He looked tired, but different now, like someone beginning to forgive himself. As the sun dipped below the tree line, I stood at the end of the dock. The water was still. The air smelled of cedar and warm bread. Brandon was gone. His plans dismantled. The lodge intact. Not perfect. Not untouched, but ours. The dock creaked behind me. My father stepped up beside me, 2 mugs in hand. He passed one over without a word. "Feels different," he said after a while. "It is. Do you think she'd be proud of us?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. We stood there, listening to the wind move through the trees, the lake lapping gently below. He cleared his throat. "So, what now?" I took a sip of coffee, then smiled. "Now we rebuild." Epilogue: Brandon never returned, not to the lodge, and not to my father. Last I heard, he was trying to pitch another lakeside experience 3 counties over. Investors were harder to come by this time. The lodge, meanwhile, came back to life. Slowly, deliberately. No fanfare, just work. We restored the garden 1 bed at a time. Lavender went on the north side, of course. The boathouse got a fresh coat of paint. The fireplace burned real logs again, and the laughter that echoed through the halls was real too. It wasn't just about defending land. It was about reclaiming something deeper. A story, a rhythm, a legacy that didn't belong in brochures or bullet point decks. It belonged in quiet mornings, hand-washed floors, late-night fires, and the kind of love that builds, not consumes. My father came every weekend, brought his own gardening gloves, said he liked the peace. I believed him. The lodge remained. Not just a place, but a promise, and I kept it. Story 2. You know how people say you marry the person, not their family? Yeah, I should have listened. I'm Riley, 28 now, but when this whole story started, I was just 24, bright-eyed, and doing my best to build a life out of nothing. I'd already been dealt a rough hand, lost both parents before I could even legally drink. The only reason I didn't fall through the cracks entirely was because of my neighbors growing up. The Morenos. Kind, older couple who took me in when I had no one. They weren't just helping me, they raised me like their own. We didn't have much, but the Morenos gave me the kind of love that doesn't make the news but changes lives. When I had turned 18, tragedy hit again. They died in a car crash on the way home from a weekend trip. Just like that, I was alone again. They left me a little savings and the deed to their house. I couldn't bring myself to live there. It felt like sleeping in a memory, so I sold it, bought a modest condo near the city, and enrolled in college for financial management. Graduating and landing a decent job wasn't the fairy tale I hoped for, but I was proud of doing it on my own. Then I met Nate. Nate had the kind of smile that made you forget your problems for a second. He was loud, messy, charming, and had absolutely zero filter. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. He spilled his drink on me, offered to replace it, and 5 hours later, we were still talking. Everything about him felt easy. A year in, we moved in together. No dramatic proposal, just him blurting, "Wanna do this forever?" One night while eating noodles on the couch, and that felt right. Honest. We got married a few months later in a tiny courthouse ceremony with close friends and a few family members. Well, his family. Mine were all gone. Nate's parents, the Whitmores, welcomed me with open arms, especially his mom, Donna. She was warm in that suburban mom who bakes kind of way, always making casseroles, always checking in. His dad, Ron, was quieter but solid. Being around them filled a little of the hole left by my own parents. We started going over to their place every Sunday for dinner. Eventually, I even started spending more time there when Nate had to travel for work. Things changed when Ron fell ill. It started with minor symptoms, fatigue, trouble walking, but within months, he needed full-time care. Nate had just accepted a year-long opportunity out of state, and Donna was overwhelmed. So, I stepped in. I packed a bag, started commuting an hour and a half each way to work, and spent my nights helping Donna cook, clean, manage Ron's medication. I wasn't a nurse. I was just trying to help. We didn't have money to spare, so I rented out my condo. Every month, I sent the earnings straight to Donna to cover groceries and bills. It was tight, but it felt right. I loved them like my own. And family sticks together, right? Then came her, Sabrina, Nate's half-sister, Donna's daughter from a previous marriage. I barely knew her. She lived out of state, rarely visited, and honestly, gave off bad energy from the start. She arrived unannounced and acted like she'd been holding the household together all along. Within days, she started taking up space emotionally, physically, and literally. She didn't lift a finger, just criticized, condescended, and tried to edge me out. One day as I was chopping vegetables, Donna sat down at the table looking drained. "We're in a tight spot," she said. "Would you consider staying longer, maybe permanently?" Sabrina's not equipped for this. I agreed. Because I cared. Because I'd promised Ron I'd help. I even sent more of the condo income when repairs came up. But Sabrina had other ideas. First came the passive-aggressive comments. "You don't really work, right? And it's so sweet you're trying so hard to help, even if it's not your place." Then she stopped being passive altogether. "This is our house," she said one night, as I cleaned the kitchen. "You're not family. You're just the girl my brother married too quickly." I tried to shrug it off, but her behavior escalated fast. She started going through my stuff, throwing out my clothes, moving my things into the basement. I confronted her. She laughed. "You don't get it, do you? You're a placeholder. Always were." I turned to Donna, hoping, praying for backup. But she didn't even look at me. "Maybe it's time you find your own place," she said. Just like that, I was stunned. After everything I'd done for them, for her, the woman who'd once hugged me and called me her daughter. I stayed a little longer after that. I don't even know why. Maybe I hoped Donna would come to her senses. Maybe I didn't want to break my promise to Ron. But it got worse. Sabrina started whispering to Donna late at night, twisting things. Suddenly, Donna's attitude flipped completely. I went from a blessing to a burden. I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. They were trying to pressure me into selling my condo, my last financial asset, so they could stabilize the household. That was it. I packed my bag in silence, called a cab, and left. No goodbyes. Just gone. I showed up on Nate's doorstep halfway across the country, exhausted and barely holding it together. He opened the door, took one look at me, and pulled me into a hug. "Riley," he whispered. "What happened?" I told him everything. Nate listened, really listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix it right away. He just sat there, his arms still around me, letting me talk through the tears and the fury and the disbelief. When I finally finished, he looked stunned. "They kicked you out?" I nodded. "Yeah. After everything. After I basically gave up my home and my life to help them." There was this long pause. Then Nate stood up, grabbed his phone, and said, "I'm calling my mom." I reached for his arm. "Wait, don't." But he was already dialing, his back stiff, his voice steady, cold. "Mom, it's Nate. I know everything. About how you and Sabrina treated Riley, about the apartment, about trying to push her out. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave her alone. Sabrina too. And don't even think about asking for money. Because as far as I'm concerned, you're cut off." I couldn't hear what she said back, but Nate's jaw clenched. "No, this isn't a discussion. If you want a relationship with me, it starts with treating my wife like family. And if you can't do that, we're done." He ended the call and just stood there for a second, breathing. Then he turned back to me. "You're not going back there. Ever." And I didn't. The days that followed were a weird mix of peace and whiplash. I was safe. I had my own space again. But emotionally, I was still unpacking everything, like how easy it had been for Donna to turn her back on me, or how Sabrina could just walk in, say a few nasty things, and flip the entire house dynamic like a switch. Nate and I agreed I'd keep working remotely. My company was surprisingly understanding when I explained I needed to relocate. We set up a little desk in the corner of the living room and made it work. I transferred my stuff out of storage. Bit by bit, I started to feel like myself again. And then, the phone rang. I almost didn't answer when I saw Donna's name, but some small part of me needed closure, needed to hear it from her. "Hello?" There was a pause on the other end. Then her voice, sharp and impatient. "Riley, why haven't you sent the money this month? You know we count on that." I blinked. For a second, I actually thought maybe I heard wrong. "I'm sorry, what?" "The rent. From your condo. We need it. Groceries have gotten expensive. And Sabrina, well, she's trying to help, but..." I laughed. I actually laughed. "You kicked me out of the house, remember? Told me I wasn't family, that I should find my own place. You don't get to treat me like garbage and then ask for handouts." Her tone changed real quick. "Riley, don't be like this. We're struggling. So was I. And you didn't care." I hung up, blocked the number, and that was the end of that chapter. Or so I thought. Turns out Sabrina had already drained most of Donna's emergency savings. I didn't hear about that directly. It came through a friend of Nate's, who bumped into Donna at a pharmacy and said she looked like a ghost. Word was Sabrina had sold a bunch of stuff from the house, claimed it was for downsizing, then disappeared. No forwarding address, no contact. Suddenly Donna was alone. She tried calling Nate a couple times. He ignored it. I didn't have to ask. We were done trying to explain ourselves to people who never listened. We moved on. We sold the condo and bought a cozy little house in a quiet neighborhood with big trees and a tiny garden. I planted rosemary and lavender out back. Simple stuff, but peaceful. And then life decided to throw us a curveball. I found out I was pregnant. I took the test in the bathroom one morning, hands shaking, heart pounding in my ears. When it came back positive, I just sat there, staring at it. When Nate came home that night, I told him by sliding the test across the kitchen counter. He froze, then broke into the biggest, stupidest grin I'd ever seen. "We're having a baby?" I nodded. "Looks like it." He lifted me up and spun me around like we were in some kind of cheesy rom-com. And just like that, everything shifted. Suddenly the anger and the bitterness that had been clinging to me for months started to fade. Not gone, but smaller, lighter. We weren't just recovering from the past anymore, we were building something new. That's when Donna called again. But this time, it wasn't about money. I didn't want to answer her call, but I did. She sounded hollow. That usual sharpness in Donna's voice, gone. What came through instead was tired, weak. Riley, I know I have no right to ask, but can we talk? There was a pause on my end. I almost hung up, but something in her voice made me stay. So I said, talk. She let out this shaky breath, like she was holding everything in for too long. Sabrina's gone. She sold the house, took the money, said it was all her inheritance. I haven't heard from her in weeks. I'm in a tiny apartment now, barely getting by. I didn't say anything. I let her keep going. I messed up. I let her poison my view of you. And now I have nothing. You were always the one helping. I see that now. I really do. Could I maybe come stay with you and Nate for a while? It was quiet for a long second. Then I said, no, just that. Calm, clear. No, you made your choice, Donna, I said, steady as stone. When you let her throw my things out, when you called me a burden, when you stood there and told me I should leave. She tried to cut in. I was grieving. I wasn't thinking clearly, but I didn't let her off the hook, and I was grieving too. For your husband, for the version of you I thought loved me. But you turned your back when I needed you most. You don't get to come back just because Sabrina ran out on you. She started crying. And yeah, part of me felt something, but not enough to forget what it felt like to be tossed aside. I'm not angry, I said, softer now. But I'm not opening my door to people who closed theirs on me. I forgave you a long time ago, Donna, but I'm done sacrificing myself to fix other people's messes. Then I hung up, for the last time, and I blocked her number. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't feel guilty. I curled up on the couch with Nate, my hand resting on my growing belly, and felt light. We named our daughter Maya. She came into the world one early morning in spring, tiny and fierce, with Nate crying harder than she was. Those first weeks, exhausting, beautiful, real. Late nights, little yawns, baby hiccups. It was a kind of joy I hadn't felt in years. The kind that made the past feel distant. Not erased, but distant. Like something you remember, but don't live in anymore. One Sunday, a neighbor handed me the local paper. I wasn't looking for drama. I was looking for coupons. But there she was. Front page, Sabrina. Turns out she'd been arrested for fraud. Some elaborate scam involving fake charity donations and identity theft. The article said she'd embezzled thousands and was facing multiple felony charges. I showed the paper to Nate. He read it quietly, then handed it back. Karma, he said. Just one word. Nothing more needed. We didn't reach out to Donna. We heard from mutual contacts that she was working 2 part-time jobs and barely making rent. That Sabrina had wiped her out completely. That she was living alone, with no car, no savings, and according to some, no one left who would return her calls. I thought about writing her a letter once, just to say, I hope you're okay. I hope you find peace. But I never sent it, because some doors once closed need to stay that way. We moved forward. Maya grew fast. First smile, first steps, first time she said mama. Every milestone felt like a small victory. Not just over what we'd been through, but for who we'd become in spite of it. We planted tomatoes in the backyard, bought a second-hand swing set, built shelves for Maya's books. Sometimes after she falls asleep, I sit on the back porch with Nate. We don't talk much during those moments. Just breathe in the stillness, listen to the crickets, feel the quiet joy of a life rebuilt. He asked me once, "Do you ever think about going back?" I shook my head. No, they already showed me who they were, and I finally learned who I am. He smiled at that, just took my hand and held it. I don't need revenge. I don't need them to apologize. I don't even need them to understand. I just needed space to live a life that's full, honest, and free. And now I have that. They tried to break me, but all they did was set me free. Story 3. You ever feel like you're just the understudy in someone else's life? That was basically my childhood in a nutshell. I'm Zoe. I'm 18 now, but this all started when I was 17, fresh out of high school, and staring down my future, something I thought I'd finally get to choose for myself. I have a twin sister, Layla, and even though we came into the world on the same day, you'd think she was the second coming, and I was just the supporting act. She was the shy, sweet one, the golden girl with the soft voice and the sad eyes, and I was the loud, ambitious twin who needed to tone it down whenever I got ahead. And I did get ahead. A lot, actually, which was always a problem. Layla and I both wanted to go into medicine. It's been the dream since we were kids. Except for me, it was my dream. I used to practice signing prescriptions in crayon. She followed. My parents thought it was cute that we had the same goals. I thought it was exhausting, especially when I started outperforming her in school. Every time I did better, they'd get that look in their eyes like I'd kicked a puppy. Don't make her feel bad. You're supposed to be a team. Maybe give her some space to catch up. Funny how she was never asked to hold back for me. Fast forward to senior year. We both worked our asses off applying to top medical schools across the country. Unlike in the US, where you do undergrad first, our country lets you go straight into med school after high school. It's competitive as hell, and we both knew that. I got into 4 universities. Layla only got into 2. I waited to see what she'd pick. I didn't want drama. She leaned toward the same one my parents wanted us both to attend. I chose a different school. I wanted space, a life, autonomy. I'd spent 17 years sharing everything from birthdays to clothes to our bedroom. I loved her, but I was so damn tired. Layla didn't take it well. Neither did my parents. When I told them I'd accepted an offer from a school she hadn't even been accepted into, all hell broke loose. My mom cried like I'd abandoned the family. My dad said I was selfish, that it wasn't fair for me to succeed without her. Let me say that again. It wasn't fair for me to succeed without her. They demanded I turn down my acceptance and enroll wherever she was going, or else they wouldn't pay for my degree. So I said okay, not to their demands but to their conditions. I told them they didn't have to worry about funding my education. I'd figure it out myself. I packed a bag, walked out, and went straight to my grandparents' place. They took me in without a second thought. The silence from my parents afterward? Deafening. My phone buzzed with messages calling me selfish, heartless, not the daughter they raised. But I didn't respond. I couldn't. I felt free for the first time, and furious. Not at Layla, at them. At the years of guilt tripping, the quiet sabotage, the way they trained me to shrink whenever I outshined her. My grandparents, bless them, were rock solid. My brothers, Elias and Max, were the only ones who didn't pick sides. Elias even brought my cat to the dorms when I moved in. Max set up a backup fund just in case my tuition got blocked by my parents. That was the other thing I had to make sure my parents couldn't screw with my enrollment. Apparently they tried. Called the university, asked if they could withdraw me. Luckily, since they hadn't paid a cent toward my tuition, the school told them they'd need to prove legal guardianship in person. I was close enough to turning 18 that by the time they got around to it, it'd be too late. So yeah, crisis mostly avoided. But the emotional fallout? Still burning. They didn't speak to me for weeks. Then one Friday afternoon, I got a message. Dinner. Our treat. Just want to talk. I hesitated. But curiosity and honestly, the promise of a free meal won. We met at this overly fancy restaurant near my campus, someplace they'd never bothered to take me before. The vibe was weird, almost like a job interview. Stiff smiles, too many compliments. Then they laid it on me. We'll pay for your tuition. If you agree to defer for a year. I blinked. A year? To give Layla time, my dad said. She's rethinking med school. She needs support. I told them I wasn't taking a gap year for someone else's indecision. That was when Dad stood up, dropped a 200-franc bill on the table, and said, "We've had enough of your attitude." They left me there, in public, with my barely touched pasta and enough cash to pay for it twice. I sat there for 20 minutes trying not to cry, then took the change and walked back to my dorm in the rain. Turns out, Layla had decided she didn't want to go to med school anymore. She wanted to take time to find herself. And apparently, I was supposed to do the same, so we could stay in sync. Because we're twins. Because it would only be fair. I haven't heard from my parents since that dinner. Layla sent a message the other day saying I'd hurt her by choosing to go to school without her. That she didn't know if she could ever forgive me. I miss her. God, I miss her. But I don't miss the expectations that came with her. I'm not turning around. My school's amazing. My professors are tough but brilliant. My roommates are weird in all the best ways. I even found a spot at the library no one else knows about. It smells like old books and fresh coffee. Feels like peace. My grandparents covered what my scholarship didn't. They won't let me pay them back, but I'm already working on that 2 side gigs, tutoring, saving up. I've got a plan. My birthday's next week. When I turn 18, they won't be able to pull me out of school even if they try. So for now, I'm holding on. I'm staying quiet. I'm building the life I've always dreamed about without apology. School was the cleanest break I've ever had. Not just from my parents, but from everything. The pressure, the comparisons, the feeling of being on call for someone else's dreams. Suddenly, I was just me. Zoe. Not Layla's twin. Not the emotional babysitter. Just a med student trying to survive 8 a.m. lectures and whatever the hell biochem was trying to throw at me that week. I won't pretend it was easy. My mind would still drift. In between labs and late night study sessions, I'd wonder if Layla was okay, if she missed me, if she hated me. I didn't hear from her for weeks after that message. The one where she said I hurt her, that I'd left her behind. It ate at me. Not because I doubted my decision, but because she wasn't the enemy. Not really. She never asked to be the golden child. She was just playing her part in a script our parents handed us. Still, she never tore the pages either. Then one night, out of nowhere, I got a call from an unknown number. I picked up expecting spam. It was the receptionist from my university's front office. "Hi, Zoe. Just letting you know someone called, asking for your full class schedule. They claim to be your legal guardian. We didn't give them anything, but we're required to notify you." My stomach dropped. I didn't have to ask. I knew exactly who it was. Apparently, my parents thought they were still entitled to every detail of my life, because signing a birth certificate apparently means access to my Google Calendar, too. I called my grandfather right after. He wasn't surprised. "They're still trying to control the narrative," he said. "But don't worry. They'll have to go through hell to get anything changed. You're almost 18. Just hold tight." That phrase stuck with me. Control the narrative. Because that's what this was about the whole time. It was never really about Layla, or tuition, or gap years. It was about image, the perfect family, the matching twins, the obedient daughter who didn't outshine her sister. I broke the script, so now they were scrambling to write a new ending one, where I came crawling back, apologizing for daring to want more. Not happening. A week later, they tried again. This time, they offered to visit me. My dad even said he'd personally drive over and take me to dinner. A peace offering, I guess. I said yes. Out of curiosity, maybe. Or because some part of me still wanted closure. They showed up all dressed up, like they were hosting a fundraiser. Mom gave me a hug I didn't ask for. Dad complimented the restaurant. Layla didn't come. The dinner started off okay. Surface level stuff. "How's school? Are the dorms nice? Do you need anything?" I kept it polite, guarded, waiting for the catch. Then it came. They said they'd decided to fund my entire tuition. I blinked. "You're serious?" Dad nodded. "But only if you defer. Just for a year. Let things settle down. Let Layla catch her breath." There it was again. Let Layla catch up. Like my life was just on pause. Like I could put it in a drawer for 12 months and pick it up later. I told them no, firmly, politely. My mom started crying right there in the restaurant. "You've changed, Zoe." My dad didn't cry. He just stood up, tossed a 200-franc note on the table like we were splitting the bill at a business lunch, and left. "I'm done with this ungrateful attitude." That night, I walked back to my dorm with leftovers in a paper bag and a tight knot in my chest. Not sadness, not regret, just this dull, heavy disappointment. They didn't miss me. They missed control. A few days later, Elias called. He was livid. Said Layla had told our parents she was taking a year off to travel and clear her head, and they'd somehow decided I needed to match her timeline. Because being twins means we have to start life at the exact same time, apparently. Like synchronized swimmers. He said Layla was still upset, that she didn't understand why I left her. But I didn't leave her. I just chose myself. Big difference. Mid-semester rolled around. I was exhausted but thriving. My GPA held up. I started tutoring in the evenings for some extra cash. I got a scholarship that covered half my housing. My grandparents stepped in and paid what I couldn't cover. They told me I didn't owe them a cent. But I keep a spreadsheet. I'll pay them back one day. Every last franc. And then finally my birthday came. I turned 18. Quietly. No drama. Just a cupcake from my roommates and a phone call from Max. I didn't post anything online. Didn't tell my parents. They didn't call either. I thought I'd feel sad, maybe nostalgic. But honestly, I just felt light. Like I'd finally stepped out from under something I didn't even know I'd been carrying. I was finally safe. Legally, emotionally, everything. They couldn't touch me anymore. After my birthday, something shifted. Not out in the world, nothing dramatic, but in me. Like a door finally closed, quietly. Just a soft click, but I knew it would stay shut. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for my parents to reach out. I wasn't checking for Layla's name in my notifications. I was just moving forward, and it felt good. But peace is tricky when you've lived your whole life managing other people's emotions. The guilt creeps in like fog, quiet, slow, thick in the lungs. Some nights I'd stare at the ceiling and wonder if I should have handled things differently. If I should have been more gentle. If Layla really felt abandoned. Or if she was just echoing what our parents had drilled into us since we were kids, that our lives were only worth something if they were happening together. That idea haunted me more than I like to admit, because I did love her. Even now, even after everything, I still catch myself thinking, she'd love this book, or she'd totally trip over this sidewalk too. I missed her. Not the version of her that clung to me out of fear, but the Layla that used to whisper dumb jokes during assemblies. The one who cried when my hamster died, even though she pretended not to like him. Then, one night, maybe 2 weeks after my birthday, I finally got a message from her. It wasn't long. Just, "I still don't understand why you left. It feels like you chose yourself over me. I don't know if I can forgive that." I stared at the screen for a long time. I could have written 100 things back, could have listed all the times I sat in her shadow, could have told her how it felt to be loved only when I made myself small, could have begged her to see it from my side. Instead, I took a deep breath and replied, "I didn't leave you, Layla. I just stopped leaving myself behind." She didn't respond, and maybe that's okay. Meanwhile, school kept me busy. Between anatomy labs, night shifts at the tutoring center, and trying to figure out how to cook real food without burning it, I didn't have much time to spiral. That helped. My roommates Kira, Lena, and Joe were the kind of people I never thought I'd meet. All different, all chaotic in their own ways, but kind. Real. They didn't know me as Layla's twin. They just knew me as Zoe, the girl who studied too much and made midnight ramen for everyone during finals week. One night, we stayed up too late laughing over nothing, and I realized I'd never laughed like that at home. Not without feeling like I had to glance over my shoulder first. This life I was building, it was mine. Fully. Around midterms, my grandparents sent me a care package. It had my favorite cookies, a tiny cactus named it Spiky Pete, and a handwritten letter that made me cry for the first time in weeks. My grandma wrote, "We're so proud of the woman you're becoming. You are allowed to want more. You're allowed to be your own person. Don't let anyone guilt you into shrinking again." I kept that letter taped above my desk. Still do, but the quiet didn't last. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. People don't like losing control, especially not people who've been in control for years. A few days before winter break, I got an email from the university administration. Apparently, someone had called again, asking to schedule a meeting on my behalf. Claimed to be a parent. Wanted access to my academic record. The school flagged it. Thank God. They didn't tell me who called, but I didn't need a name. I called my grandfather again, told him what happened. He was calm, but I could hear the edge in his voice. "They're not done," he said, "but you don't have to engage. You owe them nothing." That hit me hard, because I still felt like I owed them something. An explanation, a version of myself that made them feel okay, something to fix the story they'd built in their heads. But that was their story, not mine. So I didn't respond. I didn't call, didn't send a letter, just kept living. Eventually, Elias reached out again, said our parents were telling extended family I'd cut ties, and that they were heartbroken, that they didn't understand what went wrong. I told him they understood perfectly. They just didn't like the answer. Elias laughed a little. "You're right, but damn, Zoe, they didn't expect this from you." And maybe that was the thing. I'd been the quiet one, the peacemaker, the one who gave in, until I didn't. Winter break came. I didn't go home. Instead, I spent it in the dorms, working at a nearby clinic part-time, helping out with intake paperwork and shadowing where I could. The days were long, but good. Simple, clear. On New Year's Eve, my roommates and I watched fireworks from the roof of our building. Kira handed me a mug of cider and said, "New year, new rules." I smiled. "Yeah, no more apologizing for breathing." We laughed, but I meant it. Spring came quietly. The air got softer. The light changed. The courtyard outside our dorm finally stopped looking like a frozen graveyard, and people started eating lunch outside again. Birds came back. It felt like the world was stretching its limbs after a long sleep, and I was too. By then, I was settled. Not just in school, but in myself. I knew how to navigate lectures, labs, part-time work. I knew the bus routes by heart. I even had a go-to coffee order. I started feeling like a real person, not just someone trying to survive a storm. Then Layla reached out again. She sent a long message this time. No guilt tripping, no dramatics, just her. She said she wasn't mad anymore, just confused. That she never expected us to take different paths. And when I made that choice, it felt like I'd ripped something apart, like she lost a limb. But then she admitted something I never expected. "I think I needed you more than you needed me." And that scared me. I sat there for a long time, reading that over and over. She'd never said anything like that before. Our whole lives, she'd been the one protected, supported, always with a safety net. But maybe she was just as trapped by it all, as I was, only her cage had softer walls. I wrote her back carefully, told her I loved her, that I always would, but I couldn't go back to how things were. I told her how I used to feel like I didn't exist unless I was standing next to her, how I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't going to trade my peace for her comfort. She responded a few days later, said she understood, that she was still figuring things out too. She didn't ask me to come home, didn't ask for anything, actually. She just said, "Thanks for telling me the truth. I don't think anyone else ever has." I didn't cry, but I felt something soften. We talk now, not often, but when we do, it's real. No performances, no parents in the middle. Just us, two people who happen to be born on the same day, learning to be individuals for the first time. As for my parents, silence. They stopped trying to reach out after the spring. I think they finally realized I wasn't going to fold, that I wasn't bluffing, that I really meant it when I said I was done. It's strange. Some days, I wonder if they still talk about me at family gatherings. If they tell people I went off the rails or turned ungrateful. Maybe they do. I don't know. And honestly, I don't really care anymore. I'm not angry. Not in the way I used to be. Anger burns hot, fast. This is different. This is quiet. Still. Like a stone that sank a long time ago and finally settled at the bottom of a lake. My grandparents still call every Sunday. My brothers check in when they can. I send my grandma photos of my meals, even the burned ones. She sends back emojis like she's proud of a Michelin star chef. It makes me laugh every time. Finals came and went. I passed everything. Barely slept for 2 weeks, but I made it. And the night grades were posted. I sat on the roof again. Same spot where we watched the fireworks months before. This time, I was alone. Not lonely. Just full. I thought about everything that had happened. About how I almost gave it all up just to keep the peace. About how close I came to shrinking myself again. And how glad I was that I didn't. I used to think choosing myself was selfish. Now I know it's survival. It's sacred. I've built something from the ground up. A life where I'm not someone's shadow. A future I chose for myself. I'm not the golden child. I'm not the favorite. I'm not the one they brag about at dinner parties. I'm just me. And that's more than enough. Epilogue. It's been almost a year now. Layla's taking some art classes. She's not sure she wants to go back to med school. She says she finally feels like she can breathe, even if it's scary. I told her that's how I felt when I left, like stepping off a cliff and landing somewhere solid. We still talk, here and there. It's slow, but real. My parents haven't contacted me. Not a letter, not a text, and I've stopped checking. That door is still closed, but I've opened others. I've made friends who know me as Zoe, not anyone's twin. I'm building a life I don't want to escape from. I study. I work. I laugh. I sleep deeply most nights, which used to feel impossible. I say no without flinching. I say yes when I mean it. Sometimes people ask me if I think I'll ever make up with my family. And I always say this, maybe. But I'm not waiting on it. I'm already whole.